Welcome to Deck Tech Essentials with Game Grid Lehi. I'm Spencer, and this week we're covering one of the most powerful mechanics in all of Magic the Gathering, Ramp. The word ramp in the context of MTG comes from two things. The first is likely exactly what you're picturing, a ramp. If you were to graph the total mana value available each turn, it would resemble a ramp. But unlike an actual ramp, the steeper the better. The second reason it's called ramp comes from a card that has been a go-to ramp spell for green decks since the 90s, Rampant Growth. It reads, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. We can all agree that players who spend the most mana are typically the players who win the most games, which makes getting to your big mana spells all the more important. Green has access to the best ramp spells in Magic, as the way they boost your mana is using lands. Land destruction is an uncommon enough strategy in MTG that you can rarely overcommit when it comes to increasing your land count. Not to mention all the payoffs you get for your landfall triggers. If you're in green, you should be using ramp spells that put lands onto the battlefield. But what should you do if you're not in green? The answer is simple: artifacts. Despite being more volatile than the land strategy, ramping using artifacts will make your decks more explosive and get you to those big spells more often. 2-mana ramp artifacts like signets or talismans are a great way to give you +1 mana each turn. It's also unlikely that your opponents will see them as a threat, so you can ensure that your ramp investment stays around for longer. There are plenty of utility artifacts, but beware. Artifacts are among the easiest permanents to remove, so if the utility is too intimidating, you may not get to keep them for long. Here are a few questions to consider when deciding if a ramp spell is good enough. Will this pay itself off? Will this set me up for future plays? How often will I cast this spell when it's in my hand? Ramp spells are best utilized when you play them on the first few turns, so it's important to consider what you will do with those spells when you draw them in the late game. Artifacts like Mind Stone and Hedron Archive have secondary abilities which allow you to sacrifice them to draw cards, giving them some extra use in the late game. Some players like to include ramp spells that cost 5 or more mana, skipping the utility of low-cost ramp in the early game in favor of 1 or 2 explosive turns later on. Two such examples are Chromatic Orrery and Mirari's Wake. Chromatic Orrery is a 7-mana legendary artifact which reads, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color, tap, add 5 colorless mana to your mana pool, and pay 5 and tap, draw a card for each color among permanents you control. Mirari's Wake is an enchantment for 3 colorless, 1 white, 1 green, which reads, creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced. Big Mana Ramp is the most useful in the late game when you can ensure that the extra mana can be used to boost you ahead or even close out the game. Most optimized commander decks stick to about 8 to 10 ramp spells. That number typically increases when your commander is more than 3 mana. But each deck is different, so add some more ramp, try it out, and find what works for you. Every deck in every format has access to ramp spells of some kind that could take your game to the next level. What's your favorite ramp spell? Comment down below, and don't forget to check out gglehi.com for all your nerdy needs. I'm Spencer with Game Grid Lehi, and I'll see you next time for more Deck Tech Essentials.